Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are back in War Thunder and we're going to be talking about something that is new and something that is old. You may remember last year there was an event called World War II Chronicles. Now basically this was an event where, well, it was several events over a period of some weeks where you had to complete challenges and you got some vehicles out of it. There was the LVT with the ZIS gun on it, basically the long-barreled gun, which was very nice to get. The ME-262 with only 230s. There was the Kai-21, and also, I can't remember the last one. It was the Type 62, of course, the Chinese kind of pseudo-light T-54. So, why are we talking about that again? Well, it seems like if you go on the War Thunder Reddit, it looks like we're having another World War II Chronicles. All of the links for the relevant details will be in the description. Thank you to Mk.II who published this on the War Thunder Reddit. And basically it talks about the vehicles that you can get and also the tasks and the unlockable 3D decorators, because you've got to remember last time we also had them too. So, let's see what the vehicles are. I'm not going to talk about the tasks themselves. I believe I did a thoughts video on World War II Chronicles last time, lambasting it before they changed it to be a bit lower than it was before. And this time it seems very similar to what it was before. So, what we're going to do is, instead of focusing on that, we will leave that for after the event, if it does actually happen, because remember, this is all speculation. This is all mined from the dev blog or unofficial, well, not unofficial, but basically updates that happen and data mined, and then you can have a look at them. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but that's basically how it works. Mk.II seems to be very reliable. He is a person that had a lot of information about a lot of the stuff that was getting put into update 1.67 before it was released, which is why I'm fine with talking about this now. So, let's get into the vehicles. First off, we have the Matilda. Now, what is special about this Matilda? Well, it is the Mk.II F96. It's going to be a Russian Rank 2 vehicle, probably premium, maybe gift, we don't know yet. But what is special about this Matilda? Well, this was a prototype built by the Russians, and it had an interesting gun on it. It had the 76 on it that you see on certain Russian vehicles. It had the 76mm ZIS-5 gun. Now, we already have this in-game. Let's see. It is on the KV-1S. It is on the KV-1 ZIS-5, and I believe it is also on one of the T-34 somewhere. Maybe not, though. But it's at least on some of the heavy tanks. And basically, this was designed to be another infantry tank to help it out. One of the Lend-Lease variants from Britain, but unfortunately it never really made it to the battlefield. The reason for this basically is because they wanted to use the guns on their actual machines, on their actual own tanks. So I'll read it from the link I've posted in the description. The Fate. In January of 1942, the modified tank was sent to Moscow for testing. Come March 1943, the Commissar for Tank Industry 5, Malyesheva, and Commissar for Weapons, it's V. Malyesheva, my god, I'm a bit tired, sorry, D. Ustinovu, contacted the design team in a letter basically telling them the project was cancelled as the guns were needed for the USSR's own tanks, which were rolling off the assembly line by the battalion load. Because of this, the project was cancelled with just the one prototype built. The prototype was likely scrapped soon after. So, yeah, it's kind of as simple as that, really. You have an interesting tank in the form of a Matilda Mk.II, which has a ZIS-5 76mm on it. If you actually look at some of the pictures of this interesting contraption, it basically looks like they welded the front, the gun mantlet of a KV-1 onto a Matilda, and that's how they did it, and that's basically it. So yeah, there's your first vehicle that you're getting. So it's nice that it's definitely a different vehicle, even though all of the components we already have in game right now. It's nice to see different variations, and as a World War II Chronicles vehicle, I think it's good to have these prototype vehicles, which, depending on their BR, probably won't be very good, but they are interesting, very much like the LVT that we got in the game last time. So let's move on to the other tank, which you'll get for doing 11 stages. The Matilda is at 6 stages, and this is at 11. So the UK gets some love at rank 3. We get the A33 Heavy Assault Tank, the Excelsior. Now, if you haven't heard of this tank, well, it's basically a mini TOG 2. The reason why this was built is because the British believed that they needed some kind of at least competition to the Churchill. So some people got together, took it upon themselves to try and build some competition. They took an A27 Cromwell design, they added armor to it, and capiche, that was basically it. That's what they did. They made the suspension a little bit better, they tried some little different things to basically compensate for the amount of armor they've put on it. But if you look at the original Excelsior that they created, which was the 6-pound variant, so with the 6-pounder gun, it looks very, very similar to the Cromwell. But the one I'm hoping that we get into game is the upgunned version with the 75mm, the Ordnance QF 75mm. Now, we already have that in game. It is on the Churchill Mark 7, the 75mm OQF Mark 5 cannon. And because the Excelsior was basically designed to be at least a competitor to the Churchill, it would be nice to see it around that BR as well. The unfortunate thing about it is that, well, it doesn't have the real same armor as the Churchill, and it was also a little bit faster, which was good. It had a okay beefy engine at 620 brake horsepower. If you compare that to the Churchill in game, the engine power is 350 horsepower at 2,200 RPM. It could go at 20.3 kilometers an hour, whereas the Excelsior itself was also incredibly slow. And that's about it, really. There's not really a lot that's interesting about this tank, apart from it's something new to the game. It's an up-armored Cromwell, an incredibly up-armored Cromwell. Will it do well in the game? Well, do you think the Churchill Mark 7 does well in the game at 4.7? I would argue it does okay, since it has some interesting areas where people shoot it in the wrong areas constantly, because we are trained in War Thunder to shoot at the flat places, and against the Churchill you kind of shouldn't really. You should try and shoot it through the tracks or shoot it through the bottom bit. Shooting it through the turret, at least on the front, is quite hard to do, especially with the tracks on it, and that little flat bit, which is just in front of the driver and the machine gunner, is 154mm, so as long as you don't get up-tiered, the Churchill should be able to bounce shots from there. So, maybe the Excelsior will be able to bounce some shots, but it does unfortunately have that 75mm gun, which around 4.7 is pretty much useless. This thing was compared to the M6 heavy tank. I would say that the M6 is better, or will be at least better in game. Whether it was better in real life, well, we'll never really know, since the Excelsior was never put into production. The reason for that is because they basically decided to stick with the Churchill. They thought, why change the design, just keep going with what they went for. And after the issues with the earlier Churchills were sorted out, because they did have quite a few issues. They had the fact that the Churchill was very much underpowered when it came to its engine. It didn't have a great gun, to be quite honest. And by the time they decided to start up-gunning it and up-armoring it, so were the Germans with their long 75s and their 88s. So it made sense for the Churchill to be up-armoured as well. So eventually, once they were all sorted out, with the versions such as the Mark 7, there was really no need for the Excelsior. So it kind of just went into history, like a lot of other British tanks, such as the Valiant. That is an interesting tank, if you want to look at an interesting tank. I have no idea what they were thinking. Just reading about the Valiant is mind-boggling. Well, a lot of reading about British tank design is quite mind-boggling, but let's get on to the planes. So what do we have for the planes? We have the PV-2D Harpoon, a USA Rank 2. This is the 6-stage plane that you're going to get. Now, what is the PV-2 Harpoon? Well, after talking to Rex and a few others, it seems to be a improved version of the B-34 that we have in game right now. If you know about the B-34, it is a medium bomber sat at 2.7 in the American tech tree. It has pretty good armament when it comes to turrets and when it comes to forward-firing guns, but it does suffer a little bit on its bomb load, where it can only carry 2,250 pounds, but at 2.7 that's still not that much of a slouch. Now, from after reading on the Stockton Field Museum website, the PV-2D seemed to be developed from the Ventura, which is the B-34. And basically it's because the USAAF had a monopolization on land-based bombers. So what the US Navy wanted was something that would be able to attack submarines, attack ships, maybe do some decent bombing missions, be able to carry a decent amount, so they developed the PV-2 Harpoon, which was a variant of the Ventura, which is the B-34 that we have in game. The difference between the two is that the PV-2 could carry up to 4,000 pounds, so 1,800 kilos, so it already nearly doubles the bomb load that the current B-34 in-game has. And it was also able to carry 8 5-inch or 127mm HVAR rockets under the wing. So basically it could be kitted out to do quite a lot of damage in-game and in real life. The great thing about this aircraft is that it was actually used, it was interesting, and maybe you can make an argument for the PV-1 or the PV-2 being put into the core tree, but it is still nice to see it in-game. Another key difference between, from what I've read at least, I may be wrong about this, between the PV-2 and the B-34 is that the B-34 has that front gunner, which is also a bombardier, and the two guns on the front. So the configuration of the PV-2 is exactly the same as the B-34, apart from that front guy right in the nose who has those two 7.62mm Browning machine guns. He is gone, and the only armaments you have on the front are the two 12.7s. So you have the two gunners at the back, and you have two 12.7s in the nose, but you do not have that guy who is sat there. And I'm guessing maybe that's where the extra bombs are sat, or maybe they just decided because they were low flying, they didn't need them. But he's not there, so you do lose a crew member, and you do lose some guns on the front, but it is only two 7.62s, and if you are quicker and have a bigger bomb load and able to carry rockets, I really think that is definitely worth it. It could also carry torpedoes too, so that will be carried over from the B-34. Moving on, we have an interesting one which there isn't a lot of details about according to the Google Doc. So we have a Yak-3 P, the USSR Rank 3, this will be 11 stages, no details on how it is different from the one in game. So that's where we stand with the 11 stage fighter, or plane I should say. I really hope it is not the Yak-3 P, because that would be kind of a, not really a kick in the face, but last time for doing all of these stages we were able to get the ME-262A2A, and we also know that they have in the background a HE-162 waiting in the wings. It is in game right now, the HE-162. I believe it's either the A-1 or the A-0. You can play against it in custom battles, or in, the mission editor, I should say. So I thought that would be the next World War II Chronicles. But it seems like they're saving it. Maybe because last time it was the ME-262 and they want a bit of variety. They want a different country to shine. But why pick a Yak-3 P? Now, the only two explanations I can think of for picking a Yak-3 P would be if they are giving people the Yak-3 VK107, which is at 6.0, and it is a post-war super prop, basically. It is the top prop when we look at the Russian nation. It is the one that everybody flocks to if they want to be very competitive at Tier 4. But we're talking about a Tier 3 Yak-3 here. The Yak-3 P right now is at Tier 3 and it is at 5.0. There is nothing really that is like it when it comes to premiums, apart from that Yak-3 VK107. What it could be, though, is something that we dug up while we were looking at this, and this would be the Yak-3 PD. Now, the Yak-3 PD was a Yak-3, of course, P, which had a VK105 PD engine in it, so it's named after its engine. It was a high-altitude fighter, it was incredibly light, and it only had 123mm in it, the NS-23, which you see on many of the fighters for Russia at Tier 4. You have the LA-9, which has 4 of them, 150, 300 for all 4 cannons. So if it is this Yak at Tier 3, and it only has 60 rounds with 123, even though it's a high-altitude fighter, it's incredibly fast, it's got a wonderful engine, I'm not sure that would be great as a plane to get after 11 stages. I feel like a lot of people would turn off after getting the PV-2D Harpoon. So that is the only one I'm kind of disappointed about, because it's not really anything different. The PV-2D is slightly different to the B-34, nothing massively different, but the two tanks are hugely different to what we have in game. Even though, as I said, the components of the Matilda and the gun of the KV-1 ZIS-5 are in game, putting them together makes something completely new, kind of like the LVT with the Russian gun on it. The Excelsior, even though it is a what's the word? Oh, it's a Cromwell at heart. It is a Cromwell at heart. It has more armor. It has not really a different gun to one of the Cromwells, but it's basically an up-armored Cromwell with some really interesting designs. Looks completely different, would really need a completely different model on it. So that's nice, but when we look at the Yak-3 P, now since it says that there is no details on how it's different, it could be completely different to how it's described here. Remember, this is all speculation when it comes down to it at the end of the day. Now, just as a little tidbit at the end of it, you will remember that in the World War II Chronicles, they actually gave away other stuff when they were doing the World War II Chronicles things. They weren't just giving away vehicles, they were also giving away stuff like decorations and things like that. So I'm just looking at what I actually picked up. I believe I picked up, would it be the ski? Yeah, it must be the ski. And then I picked up maybe some of the guns. I'm not exactly sure what they gave away, but I know they gave away some things when it came to that. So this time, we have some other decorations, unlockable 3D decorators. We have the Lanchester Mark I. Now, if you don't know what the Lanchester Mark I is, it is a submachine gun. It looks very similar to a Sten gun, which is probably, you know, what you would know it as, or if you saw it, you would think it was a Sten gun. So that is basically the Lanchester. So it's a British-made, interesting gun. It was made by the Sterling Armaments Company, so that will be nice to put on your tank. We have the M3 grease gun, which, if you are familiar with American tank crews during World War II, or if you are familiar with the early Call of Duty games on console, you will know the grease gun very well. since it seemed like every tank mission you were using that as the Americans. And then of course the PPSH-42. Oh, you gotta love it. The PPSH is finally coming to game in a big way. Now, it's probably been here before and I've just not noticed, but this is the first time that I'm hearing about it. I really hope they give it that round drum. If they don't give it that round drum and they just give it the stick, ooh, I'm not sure about it. I don't know where I'd stick it on my tank. I think I would feel like I was undercompensating if I put it with only the stick and not the round drum. I want the round drum. Then we have the STG-44, which was an assault rifle used by the Germans at the end of the war. Unfortunately, it was never really used in massive production. A lot of people see it as an amazing invention, which unfortunately came around at kind of the wrong time once again for the Germans, where it came near the end of the war, and unfortunately it didn't really make that much of an impact because there wasn't really enough of them. And it looks like, looking at the picture, the PPSH does not have the round drum, it has the stick of a clip. So that is very sad. God damn it. I've already been screwed over in my Thompson, and now I'm screwed over in the PPSH. Moving on, we have the Type 100, which is very similar to how the Lanchester Mark I looks, apart from it has a curved clip instead of a straight one. This is a gun which, you know, is basically the standard submachine gun of the Japanese in any game that you may have ever played, if you played against them or with them, ranging from Medal of Honor to Call of Duty to anything really, when it comes down to it. So the Type 100 is probably a gun you know about, since it's one of the only Japanese ones you really hear about. So that's it. That's the unlockable 3D decorators. That is the tanks and the planes looked at, and overall I'm looking forward to this. Mainly the tank ones. The plane ones not so much, but then again there's no real catch for me. The catch last time was an ME-262 with 230s and bombs. An interesting, even though very similar model to others we have out there, an interesting vehicle because it was slightly different than the others. If this Yak-3 P just turns out to be a premium Yak-3 P, which I highly doubt, just thinking about this. But if it does, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people are going to be hurt by that. So, hopefully it isn't, and we'll have to see tomorrow, because tomorrow is supposed to be when this starts. I'll see you then.